Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Once again, it's time for another power building training vlog, and today was leg day. So what I did today is what I did last week. We built up to a heavy single on a beltless low bar squat, and then we did 10 sets of high rep quad work in the 10 to 20 plus rep range. So on this, something I'm thinking about a little bit. I'm actually at this point really considering throwing a belt back on just for squats and deadlifts, only for these heavy singles. Actually thinking about it, mainly just to get more load on the bar for it. And it's something I'll think about. It's not really a big deal to anyone who tries to say it's a dogmatic shift in any way. No, not really, because everything else will be raw. Really just for a couple heavy singles out of my 2 out of my 5 days every week. And if we were going to build up for anything, these are the lifts that it kind of makes sense to do so. It makes sense. Today, again, I'm a little squishier than I was earlier this week. I have a feeling it will drop off this weekend. Tends to happen that way, by the way, because I eat more calories throughout the week during my training days, possibly a factor also. One reason I tend to look tight on Mondays. I fast longer on the weekends, and I tend to eat a little less calories. And then occasionally, depending on my social life, sometimes at least a couple of days every month, I get very, very little calories and mostly protein. Just because I choose to only take lean protein and stuff with me when I do certain social events with close friends. So that tends to help a little bit. Definitely tends to help. But the training itself went pretty good, that aside. Like I said, feel like I'm looking a little squishier today, but I always say that on leg day, don't I? It seems like it happens every Friday. So what I did today, I streamlined it a little bit more. Instead of saying, well, let's take a bunch of these sets. We just did 5 and 5. So I did 5 sets of the belt squats, and we did use some progression here. I kind of said last time I felt like the 180 was getting a little light. The 5th set was actually pretty hard. Like the 10th rep was actually pretty challenging on the last set of this, so it was a good weight to work with, and I think that can be a good way to go on these. Now that I'm getting used to this technique, and I feel like I get a really good stretch in the quads, it's helping bring my quads up. I feel like they're getting bigger already, visibly, right? I feel like they're visibly getting bigger. So I feel like, again, the progressive overload on this will help, and then we just finish out with the pump work on the leg extensions. And kind of like this is more or less what I promote all the time, right? So I mean, really, this would almost be the crux of power building. We took one of the classic big 3, did a heavy single. We came in and did around the 10 rep range with a big compound movement. Okay, so still heavy work, especially for lower body. 10s for legs is still pretty heavy. Okay, and then we did really high reps on an isolation movement. So what do we have? Power lift, which constituted really one work set. One work set added up, and then 10 sets of hypertrophy work. But that's about what we would expect, right? And a power building program like this, it's kind of what I tell people, man, your heavy work is only going to be about 5% of your training. Your truly heavy work, like your classic lifts, 5%. Like, we can recover from that. It doesn't even interfere. Like, there's no downside to that, really. There's no downside. Okay? So we do that, and then it's what I would normally consider as normal bodybuilding training. Moderately heavy weight with a big compound, and then we take an isolation and then finish it off. And my other muscles, I'm aware I use more complexity, but I feel like on these, because of lack of equipment and the fact that, quite frankly, my lower body at this point is slightly less priority than things like my arms and whatever. I'll live with it. So we'll have a little less variety. I don't feel like I need as much, but keeping in mind, it's just the quads. And even though the quads are a really big muscle, biggest muscle in the body, for some reason, I don't know why people are trying to argue that point, by the way, in my lives or whatever. I don't get it. They didn't do basic research. I guess. But even though the quads are a big muscle, they're not a complicated muscle. It's not like they have a lot of functions. So I feel like realistically, after doing just a heavy back squat, one big compound and one isolation for them should be enough if the volume is sufficient to be where we want it. And I feel like for me, 10 sets should be good. And no reason you can't build big quads off of just leg presses and leg extensions at a commercial gym. I would use a leg press if I had one. I'd feel it'd be easier to set up than the belt squat. But then again, you've got to load a lot more plates, so maybe not. Might not be. I guess it's all give and take. So really, I'm not going to complain. Like I've said before, I wish I had a leg press instead of the belt squat. But now that I've really kind of found the right angles and I quit trying to be silly with it, taking the handles off because I felt like I was concerned with losing tension at the bottom, instead of realizing even if I lose a little bit and I still get close to failure, the workload's the same. It's designed to need handles. That's really the key. So you have the same issue with those little levers that people buy that they hook onto the side of a rack, right? They're not going to work. They're not going to work. Just like my belt squat didn't work when I pulled the handles off, because it's on a curved setup like that. It's not straight up and down, like say a leg press would be, or a hack squat. Because of that, you need the handles to get the proper positions. Otherwise, you cannot get into a deeper position on it. It doesn't work. Doesn't work. And then of course the leg extension here on this is a bit of a compromise, but still same thing at the end of the day. May not get quite the deep stretch, but people argue the leg extension doesn't do that anyways, does it on any machine? So it is more of a contracted position, shortened position movement. And that's okay for an isolation, because our big compound is a deep stretch. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. And it's working a separate angle. And leg extensions grow quads decently well in any study I've ever seen, right? But that's the thing. We really can train our legs with machines for the most part. I mean, realistically, I have no issue with people doing exclusively machines for lower body as long as they're doing a little squatting and deadlifting, right? You do your heavy work on the barbell, even if it's just singles, you can build legs just fine on machines. Never had an issue with that, really. Totally doable. I just don't like the Smith machine, right? I'm just not a fan. But leg presses, they've always worked great. Leg extensions can work. Reverse hypers, hamstring curl machines, yeah, it all works. It all works. I mean, I like having a glute ham raise, but I would be just fine with a leg curl machine, a seated one, if that's all I had. So overall, happy with today's workout, though. Again, very, very simple, very straightforward. I had to adjust this a little bit. Notice I went over to a strap finally, kind of figuring out how to make this work ideally. We adapt, overcome. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.